biggest threat to health today is climate change. Agriculture and food security are directly threatened by climate change, affecting food prices, and the most vulnerable are being affected.
How do you see the health crisis as a climate issue?
Food is medicine. The food you eat heals your body, keeps you healthy, and makes sure that you can live a full and meaningful life. Because when food prices rise, people can't afford to eat healthy diets.
Why do women need to be at the forefront of this?
Because we're most affected by the climate crisis. And I love the Dandelion movement because it puts women at the forefront of the change.
I believe we can solve climate crisis together.
Definitely.
President and CEO of One Campaign, a serial social entrepreneur, a woman who serves on the board of multiple companies and foundations, founder of Leap Africa, and a recipient of more awards than I can count. And I'm sure I'm missing so many things that you've done. Ndidi Nwuneli, welcome to Sustainability with Shreya, and thank you so much for being here with me today.
It's my pleasure. It's really an honor and privilege to engage in this conversation.
It's all mine, really. I'd love to start with what One Campaign is and what it does, and the role that you've taken on and what that entails.
So One Campaign was started by Bono and some other amazing activists 20 years ago to really advocate globally for infrastructure financing for Africa with a focus on addressing poverty and disease. And that was 20 years ago. So they led the Jubilee campaign. They led campaigns around debt forgiveness. They activated young people across the world who marched and supported politicians to do the right thing, commit funding where it matters the most. Now, 20 years later, I have the unique opportunity to serve as the first African president and CEO. And I'm excited about the opportunity not only to galvanize catalytic and innovative financing that Africa wants to advance our health outcomes and economic opportunity on the continent, but also to hold our governments accountable for the funds that come in. We advocate for the real transformative financing from the G7 and G20 countries. We have teams in Brussels, in Germany, in France, in the UK, Canada, the US, and across Africa, and amazing activists and faith leaders, as well as influencers who support our work. So I'm really honored and privileged to have this role to lead one at this important time in our history.
We're both dandelions, and in the spirit of being a dandelion, which means connecting every issue to that being a climate issue, how do you see the health crisis as a climate issue?
Every issue is a climate issue at the moment, but it's actually really directly linked to climate change, right? Climate change is affecting health. In fact, according to WHO, the Global Fund, and even Gavi, the biggest threat to health today is climate change. And it's affecting us in a number of ways. Number one, food is medicine. The food you eat heals your body, keeps you healthy, and makes sure that you can live a full and meaningful life. Agriculture and food security are directly threatened by climate change. We're seeing rising heat levels, floods, locusts, unprecedented levels of droughts, and our farmers are most affected. What is that doing? It's leading to migration, affecting product yields and produce yields, affecting food prices, and the most vulnerable are being affected. Because when food prices rise, people can't afford to eat healthy diets. In my country, Nigeria, 84% of the population cannot afford a healthy diet. Climate change is making that even worse, 84%, which directly translates into health. If you can't eat healthy, you're going to have not only malnutrition at one end, and even at the higher end, you're going to have hypertension, diabetes, heart disease, increased rates of cancer, etc., etc. So there's a direct link to health from the food is medicine angle. The second is we're seeing increasing heat, which is not also affecting malaria incidences in many parts of the world. We're seeing flooding, which is also affecting malaria incidences. We're seeing higher rates of maternal mortality related to heat and heat waves. Women are going to labor prematurely because of the environmental stresses. And in many of our countries, women are most affected by climate, right? Not only they're bearing the brunt because they're the ones who keep the homes. They keep their children healthy and safe. When there are floods, when there are hurricanes, when there are droughts, they're bearing the brunt. And we're seeing higher incidences of maternal mortality. And so we can draw direct correlations between the climate stresses that the world is increasingly facing and health outcomes. And so that's why there's a sense of urgency that we address this collectively. And I love the Dandelion movement because it puts women at the forefront of the change. Women are champions for climate justice. They are champions for innovative solutions to address the climate crisis. But together, as a community of women, we can raise our voices, demand for public engagement, for political enablement, and for the financing required to make the shifts so that in our lifetime we can be at the forefront of climate adaptation and resilience.
Why do women need to be at the forefront of this, and how do we bring more women into this movement?
Women need to be at the forefront because we're most affected by the climate crisis. And we're also the keepers of homes, the keepers of history, and clearly at the front lines of the ag sector, the food landscape, and many of the sectors most affected by climate. Now, when women come together in hundreds and thousands, they're saying enough is enough. And they're basically uniting their voices around a common request and a common demand. But they're also leading by example. When I first got introduced to the Connected Women's Network, I met Pat Mitchell, I met Mary Robinson, and they said to me, "You are a climate champion." It was 2019, I was on corporate boards, I had my own companies, and I said, "I'm not a climate champion. I care about climate, it affects me." They said, "No, it's not enough to say you care about climate and it affects you. You have to become a climate champion." I was so energized after meeting them. I went back to all the boards I sit on and I said, "What are we doing about climate?" I sat on the boards of some multinationals, very big companies. I said, "How come we're not shifting to greener packaging? What are we doing about waste? What are we doing about water? What about ESG being instituted into our systems and structures?" And I started pushing as a climate champion. I also started developing curriculum for other entrepreneurs in the food and agriculture landscape to equip them with the skills and tools to become climate champions. And I think that's the power of a dandelion. You spread your passion, you spread your zeal, exactly, and then you empower other women to believe that they can serve as spokespeople, they can push boundaries, and they can stand up for what they believe in. And so it took Mary Robinson and Pat Mitchell to say,
Two formidable women.
Yes, step up into your power and take your rightful place in this movement. And while I'm not on their level, I've become a protege, someone who now has drank the Kool-Aid. I believe in the movement, and I'm completely in alignment through my life and my work to stand by this.
It takes a woman to hold that space for you as well, and to tell you that it can be done and it should be done, and to empower you and to give you that space to become who you're truly meant to become.
Exactly. And seeing them in their 80s, not getting tired, seeing them more energized than ever before. We have no excuse, right? We can't say, "I'm tired, I'm jaded, I'm overworked." No, you can incorporate it into your lifestyle, and you can support other women and inspire other women to follow.
Absolutely. So many of us talk about empowering women, giving women the right opportunities, or creating right spaces for them to step into that. But I think empowerment is also used negatively, and something that is more condescending. It's also used in condescending ways. What does empowerment mean to you?
So I actually don't think empowerment is a condescending word. When I feel I'm empowered is when I'm equipped with the skills, the tools, and the support to achieve my highest potential. And I have committed my life to empowering young people, empowering women to live out their full potential. I find that in many of our contexts, there are systematic barriers to women achieving their highest potential. Number one, in the homes, they are told that, they have a second place to male children, inheritance laws, land laws. There's so many barriers they see. They're also told that, you can't have it all. So choose between being a wife and being a professional woman, or being a mother and being a professional woman. You can't have it all. That's also another lie. We're also told, and I tell young women, you can't have it all at the same time. So pace yourself, right? But you can have it all. You see people who are doing it, but they haven't done it all at the same time. So don't be in a hurry, pace yourself. But empowering also means I've seen other women who have gone ahead of me, and because they did it, I believe I can. And that's why a lot of us feel the burden to be effective role models, to be vulnerable, to be honest and authentic, and to demonstrate, yes, it's tough. It's still tough. In many countries, we've regressed in terms of gender equity instead of progressing, but it is possible in our lifetime to close the gender gap. And I am pushing standing on the shoulders of giants like Pat and Mary and others to uplift more women. Brasset Michelle has a quote which says, as you climb up, don't climb alone. Yes. Pull up 10 sisters, pull up 20 sisters, climb with others. And so that, exactly, so that we can rise together.
What's the role of education, especially in the lives of women of color, and what's been the role of education in your life and where you are today?
Education is a silver bullet. I mean, there's data that demonstrates that when a woman is educated, she has a brighter future. Number one, she can plan her life more effectively. She has the power to make decisions. She has access to more income opportunities. She can actually determine whether she wants to have children and how many children she wants to have. And more importantly, she has economic opportunities to lift others up with her. And for me, education has played a vital role. I was born into a family of educators. Both of my parents are professors. So all of us were empowered to find what we were passionate about and given the luxury of getting the best education in the world. And that has opened tremendous doors. Education blows your mind open to see the possibilities in the world and removes the barriers that so much of society, religion, culture uses to hold us back.
Melinda Gates says this as well, that educating a girl is one of the most untapped climate solutions. And it's the biggest one. So if we can start educating and really believing and investing in girls, we'll see that shift. And as Mary Robinson said, women and girls need to lead this movement. And if you see this heart-centered leadership coming into play, I believe we can solve climate crisis together.
Definitely, definitely. You know, I was a visiting scholar at McGill University 2 years ago, and we had teams of students work with us. And my team was part of a project called 10,000 Girls. And my team picked helping 10,000 girls figure out how to educate more female champions in both India and Nigeria as an example for the whole world. And they drew the exact parallels you have just drawn, that education empowers women to be more effective climate champions. Women can use schools to actually educate communities, not just themselves, about climate resilience. And they're practical examples of innovation coming out of the schools led by the women to transform lives. And so it's even beyond the individual. It's how an educated woman becomes a community advocate and champion to infiltrate, become a dandelion in her ecosystem. We didn't have that language of dandelions at the time, but that was the real power of the team I worked with. And they were young women from India, young women from all over the world in this team who just gave me so much hope about the next generation.
I love that. I love that so much. And more of that, I want to see.
Exactly.
More of that. You've done so much work in the agriculture space, in the nutrition space. What is the future of agriculture? What is the future of our food systems? And where does plant-based diet fit into that, according to you?
Well, definitely. I've mentioned food is medicine. And actually, Rockefeller Foundation, a board I am very proud to serve on, has very clear data that shows that there are hidden costs to our current food ecosystem, right? 1/3 of the costs, let's just say if you spend $3 on food for whatever, $1 of that is actually the health cost.
It's a health cost.
Yes, another dollar is the climate cost. So the true value of food, you could have just thought, oh, it's $1, but $3 is the cost. So it just shows you that what are the health costs? Unhealthy diets lead to burgeoning healthcare costs because we're having health diseases associated with poor food intake and poor diets, right? In fact, poor diets lead to 1/3 of the deaths in the world, right? So it's not just malnutrition, but too much salt, too much sugar, eating a lot red meat, right? And I could go on and on and on. And that's why you need to think about plant-based diets. You need to think about regenerative diets, diets that not only enrich your body, but are good for climate.
And they're the same thing. Whatever is good for the planet is good for us.
But guess what? Because we also do not think about the full cost of food and the true cost of food, what do? We waste so much food at the farm gate. We waste so much food in our homes. That also exacerbates greenhouse gas emissions.
Is it 1/3 of total food produced in the world?
Yes, that's thrown away. Yes.
1/3 of total food, and imagine the number of people.
So imagine, exactly. So the challenge for us as climate champions is to say, what is the right diet and what is the power we have to make decisions based on what we eat? And that led to my TED Talk on the power of the plate, because the TED Talk basically talks about the critical role we have to play as agents of change in determining the future of the world we want. Now, when you choose to eat a meal, it has implications. Number one, how much do you put on your plate determines how much you waste,
In
right?
terms of volume.
Exactly. Where you're sourcing the food from determines how much you waste. If you have shorter value chains and if we're buying from farmers who are closer to us, we reduce food waste, right? And tracking that not only improves the lives of the farmers, ensures that we're eating fresher food that's healthier for us. It also ensures that we're eating food that's indigenous to where we're from. Instead of spending billions importing salmon when there's no salmon around where we live. I'm using that as an example, but we could say so many other things, right? We should be eating cassava flour instead of wheat because we can grow cassava in our neighborhoods, etc., etc. So shorter value chains, less food on our plates ensures that we have less waste. So that addresses the greenhouse gas emissions and ensures that we have a lot more management of the food that we grow. The second thing is, what do you put on that plate? And is it regenerative? Is it healthy? Regenerative means that as you're taking out of the environment from the soil, you're replenishing the soil. The soil stays healthy.
What kind of foods do that?
Well, legumes are very good at regenerative because as they actually enrich the soils. So we've focused a lot on, the staples like wheat and rice and maize. And those ones, it's very difficult to grow them regeneratively unless we use more indigenous varieties, mulching. We actually manage our water use. Do you understand? And we intercrop them with other things like legumes. So you're growing rice, but then you have beans and lentils grown next to it. That enriches the soil. And the fact that you then embrace more indigenous homegrown products and you're intercropping and you're not having a monoculture enriches your soil. So it's changing the way that you grow food back to how our forefathers used to grow food.
Exactly.
We went through the Green Revolution, increasing productivity, but then forgetting that we're depleting the soils. And when you deplete the soils, it makes it harder for the soils to sustain themselves when you have drought, when you have heat, when you have floodings, right? And so regenerative growth is very important. And guess what? In India, in South Asia, in Africa, our farmers used to grow regeneratively, and we have to embrace our indigenous practices.
Absolutely.
But then also the foods we choose to eat have to be foods that also enrich our bodies, are good for gut health, are good for mental health. Do you understand? And there's so much interlinked.
Yeah.
What you eat affects your mental health. What you eat affects your gut health. So as we learn, we're going back to indigenous knowledge. There's a community in Tanzania, the Hadzibe people, who till today, they're one untouched community. They eat 10 times more fiber than the average American. Their food is loaded with vitamin C. Whatever they eat is gathered from the soil. And we need to embrace some of our indigenous practices and teach the world how to heal itself using food. Most importantly, food builds bridges. It connects people. In our cultures, food is love. Healing. And I think we need to embrace that. Again. We are struggling with many, many issues as a human race. And food is one way that we heal our minds, heal our bodies, heal our souls. And that's what I try to introduce through my TED Talk.
That's beautiful. And that's what I think sustainability means to me as well, because in Indian culture, in African culture, and so many South Asian cultures and cultures from Global South, our ancestors knew how to live sustainably. They knew what they were growing. They knew what they were doing. So if we can retain the progress that we've made and just go back to that relationship that we used to have with nature, I think we find that perfect balance and living in harmony with ourselves, with our bodies, but also with the environment around us.
Definitely,
and the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
I love that you advocated for plant-based diets, but of course there are challenges in that space.
Yes.
Would you like to touch upon the challenges?
There are lots of challenges just because of how our food ecosystem has evolved. And because it's very concentrated, what you have is that the healthy diets are too expensive. I mentioned the statistics saying that 84% of Nigerians cannot afford a healthy diet.
Yeah.
Imagine that our indigenous food is healthy. But because we've shifted away from our indigenous food and embraced foreign foods that are considered more prestigious, aspirational,
of sorts,
we then find that the average person cannot afford a healthy diet. So for food to truly enter into the mainstream healthy food, we have to make sure it's affordable. accessible,
Yes.
acceptable, and I want to stress affordable. It has to meet the price points of the lowest income populations. It has to be accessible, means it has to be within their reach. If they have to travel hours to get that food, it's useless. It has to be acceptable, and acceptability we take for granted. And so we've introduced things like orange flesh sweet potato, right? Or vitamin A maize. And then we find out people say, well, I don't know, this doesn't look like the color of the sweet potato I'm used to. In their mindset, they're not going to eat it. Absolutely. So it has to be something that they can accept, right? It also has to be easy to prepare, because if soya beans is a very healthy and homegrown indigenous soya beans from Nigeria is wonderful, but it takes the average woman 3 hours to cook soya beans. So that's where food processing that is really climate smart comes in, where you're saying, okay, we're going to pre-process it for you. We're going to make it into a flour. Then you can have a porridge. Instead of having to cook it or grind it for hours, that's why people gravitate towards instant noodles. Not because they're tasty, but because they're convenient and cheap. Yeah. So we're going to have to innovate and invest in convenient and affordable, but healthy and tasty, so that they can accept it. And there's a lot of work going on. I'm a co-founder of a food company called Ace Foods. It took us 5 years to come up with a tasty snack made up of indigenous products that's healthy. Yeah. 5 years.
Wow.
The
R&D that went
yes,
into it.
because the price point was critical and we had to use local produce. So I think the next time, hopefully, it will take us fewer years. And that's why we need to support our SMEs that have come up with innovative solutions and enable them to scale.
Absolutely. So the roadmap to getting there looks like better subsidies, or subsidies in the right direction at least. Government and policies playing a big role.
And then empowering small businesses that are committed to doing the innovation work to scale. And that's what we're doing with African Food Change Makers, one of the organizations I've started, enabling African food entrepreneurs to not only build sustainable businesses that nourish Africa, but also change global narratives.
Absolutely. And similar issues in India as well, as you said. The idea around plant-based diet is that it's unaffordable. Vegan food is unaffordable. But if you go back to staple diets, as you mentioned, millets, we've grown millets for centuries, but millets are now making a sexy comeback. And it's not a new thing. We've had it in our cultures for forever.
Yes.
So embracing that again. Coming back to being this formidable female entrepreneur that you are, what do you attribute your success to?
I would say, first of all, I don't know if I can say I'm successful. But if I had to say what is the rationale or reason, I'll say number one is God. I am a strong believer that we're all sent here to fulfill our purpose, and we have to be committed to achieving what God has sent us to achieve. And so my source of strength and faith keeps me going, my faith in God and my trust in God. And I'll say a real support network. I am surrounded by formidable men and women who have served as angels, who are my champions, my mentors, my supporters. Pat gave me the opportunity to do the TED Women Talk, right? At first, I wanted to do one on changing narratives because I'm so upset that the world thinks of Africa and they think of a hungry child. So I've been doing a lot to change narratives, using food as a way to build bridges. But she challenged me to say, you're not an African leader, you're a global leader. Talk about an issue that affects other communities. Yeah. And I decided, okay, I'm going to do that, but use African examples. That way you change narratives in a subtle way, right? And having champions and sponsors like Pat Mitchell have been such a blessing. And I think, honestly, I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. And that has allowed me to achieve some of what God has laid in my heart too. But the work is not done. We have a long road ahead of us. And so we will continue to walk with our sisters and rise together.
What is your purpose? What is your calling? What do you think you were sent on this earth to do?
Well, quite a few callings as a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister. But professionally, one of my callings is to ensure that in my lifetime, we change the face of Africa from a hungry child to a successful female entrepreneur. Through the One campaign, what I would like to do is ensure that Africa is respected as an equal player in the financial landscape. I'll repeat that, an equal player in the global financial landscape. And because of what we've done on climate resilience and healthy lives, we serve as a beacon of hope that everyone everywhere can live full and meaningful lives.
You're on the board of a lot of foundations and companies, so I do want to ask what companies can do better in trying to create a more sustainable, equitable world, and also what foundations, funders, and philanthropists can do to help the movement grow as well.
So from the company side first, I think we have to have a gender lens through what we do as corporates and a climate lens through every aspect of operations. And we have to set clear targets and hold ourselves accountable, being transparent about our baseline and what success looks like. So I'll challenge companies, and I've challenged many companies, you have a role to play to ensure that your value chain and your supply chain has gender equity. What percentage of your suppliers are women entrepreneurs? What percentage of your food comes from female farmers? Whatever it is, you need to ensure that you have a gender lens and prove equity through your company, through your supply chain and your distribution channels. Also your boards. What a percentage of women on your boards? What a percentage of women on senior management? We're seeing more women enter companies, but we dwindle out as they rise up to senior management. And so I think that gender lens affects everything they do. Women are your customers, so they should be on your boards, right?
100%.
And then ESG. We talk about ESG and we just tick the boxes. But if you're really committed to climate resilience, it affects your business operations, your footprint, your supplier arrangements, and you have the power to influence your supply and distribution arrangements by setting clear standards of what ESG looks like. And sustainability is the baseline for that.
100%.
And so that's for the companies. Now for the boards, they're also commitments to using their money. The good thing about philanthropists is that they can use their money as catalysts for change. They can use their funds to ensure that funding goes to local organizations, women-led organizations, that they track how much is actually going to women-led and local organizations, that they set clear targets and monitor so that they're moving in the right direction, and the same with their climate footprint and how they inspire their grantees and their own operations to be climate resilient. And I'm proud to say that the boards I sit on are making those changes, and we as board members are holding them accountable.
It has to come from stakeholders as well, I think. So
Definitely.
whether it's ground up or top
Exactly.
down.
But where women have a seat at the table
100%.
that they have earned, they should use their power to make change at that table. They should not feel like, so happy I'm here, I'm not going to say anything, I'm not going to rock the boat. No, sit in your power, make your voice heard, and in your time on that board, there should be something they can point to and say, because of you, we changed that.
100%, and that's when real change starts to happen.
Exactly. And when I'm stepping off any board, I always make sure I'm replaced by another woman. And not just any woman, an African woman, because there's so few of us who have gotten into these roles, and we have to make sure that we're leaving the door open for more women to enter.
Any advice to young female entrepreneurs out there, especially women of color, people like me who look at you, who look at your journey, and I'm so inspired by everything that you've achieved in the young 49 years of your life. For me to not even be able to count the amount of things that you've achieved. How do I look at your journey as a roadmap, and what advice would you give to people looking at you?
Yes, so I would say 3 things. I would say number 1, find your why, your purpose. It's unique to you. Don't look to the left or to the right. Stay in your own lane. Your journey is unique to you. And guess what? The minute you enter your power in that journey and own your own story of authenticity, empathy, and kindness, you will succeed. I feel like a lot of young women feel pressure. I have to be on the Forbes 30 under 30. I have to be a YGL. I have to be...
I'm 28 and I'm like, I've got 1 year. I've got 1 year
Don't
to
feel
make it to
that
level.
pressure. No. There's a proverb in my culture that says, when you wake up is your morning. Right? When you wake up. When my husband and I entered agriculture, everybody thought we were the dumbest people. 2 Harvard MBAs going into farming. And then years later, how strategic were you? How do you think food was going to be so important? You're so smart. Wow. At the time when we entered, they had all the worst things to say about us. Do you understand? So that's why you have to own your story and work in your own authenticity, because your time will always come if you do what you're born to do. So that's number 1. Number 2, surround yourself with angels. I have communities of women who are holding me up, who are supporting me, who are praying for me. I call them communities of sisters, right? But they are champions, they are role models, and they are critics. And I think every young woman needs a critic, she needs a champion, and she needs a role model. And a critic who gives you feedback with love, who helps you be your best self. And you have to be willing to receive that feedback, right? But I can go into this new role on a global stage knowing I have women holding me up on every side. And I'm not alone. And you need to build that. You don't build that when you've achieved success. You build that when you're starting. Because genuine relationships are hard to build at the top. Sustaining those genuine, honest relationships is a gift you give yourself. And number 3, it's really important to be grounded in the values that are most important to you. And for me, excellence and integrity have no hiding place. Oprah said it, and I believe it. Excellence and integrity have no hiding place. If I had to pick 2 of my most important values, it's excellence and integrity.
Non-negotiables.
Yes, non-negotiables. Because when people are looking for individuals they can vouch for, they want to know that you have an impeccable track record. They want to know that you have been known as someone who has integrity. And if they scratch the surface and it's not consistent, they can't defend you. They can't put their own careers on the line to sponsor you. And so it's really important that you stick with your path. Don't be in a hurry. Pace yourself. Surround yourself with angels on assignment and stay grounded and authentic in your true self.
That's incredible. Wow. My last question to you is, what does sustainability mean to you?
That's a loaded word. Well,
unpack that.
Yes, there are many, many components of sustainability, but if I had to simplify it, I would say, there's a famous proverb or a term used in the climate movement, and my daughter actually taught it to me. We're not leaving the earth for the next generation. We're actually borrowing it from our children, right? And so sustainability for me means that every single day I live, I'm thinking about the generational impact of the choices I make. Because if I'm borrowing it from the next generation, I have to leave it better than I found it. I can't leave it worse. When we think about what our generation, and you're in a different generation, have done to the earth, it's shameful. And some families are saying they're not going to have children because their children and their grandchildren have no place in the world. The world might not exist. So the sense of urgency I have is I'm in legacy mode. And I'm thinking, I want to see my grandchildren, and I want to see that they say to me, Ndidi, you left this earth better than you found it. And I think it applies to not just climate. It applies to everything we do. So that's why it's a mindset. Before it's an action, you have to think, what I'm doing today, what does it have an implication for the future? So sustainability is both a mindset first, and then it's a set of actions to ensure that we actually do our part, whether it's through the way we live our lives, we govern our countries, we manage our companies, and we engage with others. We leave behind an earth that we can be proud. When our children and grandchildren hold us to account, they say you did a better job in leaving something behind, as opposed to destroying. And for me, that's why it starts in the mind and then it flows into action. I am leaving, and I want to leave this world better than I found it.
Regenerative legacy as well. I'm so grateful for this conversation. I'm so grateful that you decided to do this with me, and for giving me this opportunity of having this conversation with you, and for leaving me so inspired. Thank you for all the work that you do, and I can't wait to see you thrive in the role that you've taken on and to change the landscape of health crisis, and to not make it a health crisis, and to change the landscape of that. I am so inspired, and I'm so grateful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And keep up the great work. We're so proud of you, and we're rooting for you to succeed.